Being a mob boss in New Jersey isn't easy. It's not physical labor or customer service, but it's still got headaches all its own. Stuck between constant surveillance from the federal government and threats from the greedy as all hell Lupertazzi Empire just across the Hudson, the fiefdom Tony Soprano controls is essentially a middle management gig. He runs things around Satriali's and the Bing, but when push comes to shove, has no choice but to bend the knee to Carmine Sr. on the various big-ticket jobs with Assemblyman Zellman, cutting the King of New York in on the HUD and Esplanade scams, all while constantly looking over his shoulder for signs of imperial overreach. As when Johnny Sack moves in down the street, when Phil Leotardo later decides it's time to try and decapitate the glorified crew. Do business with what's left. As if this rock-in-a-hard-place lifestyle isn't stressful enough, Tony also has to deal with treachery and sabotage from members of his own organization. Snakes in the grass like Uncle Junior, volatile short-fuse Richie Aprile with the Manson lamps, cokehead Ralph Cifaretto with the cheese grater fetish, not to mention the fickle flirtations of Paulie Walnuts, riding Johnny Sack's coattails like a 95-pound mole on Jenny Sack's ass. It's enough to make a man develop a panic disorder, go see a shrink, self-medicate with Italian deli meat. One of the most challenging episodes in Tony's life occurs in Season 2 when Richie Aprile gets released from prison and comes out hot, hitting the streets like pigeon shit on a black Mercedes in the middle of July. He's hungry for money, but more so for power. He's pissed off that the world has moved on without him. The people who used to be under him are now over. First order of business for Richie is dropping in on Beansy Gaeta, his one-time partner in a highly lucrative heroin trafficking operation, likely the same one that got Richie sent away for 10 years. Beansy's now a successful restaurant owner, running a chain of pizza parlors that moonlight as money laundering locations for Tony's less than legitimate operations. The way Richie looks at it, Beansy owes him a little. Actually, he owes him a lot. Beansy, who's not a made guy but is definitely not a punk, correctly assesses Richie's oblique threats for what they are. A shakedown. Attempt at extortion. So he pushes back, tells him he won't lay down for him. Unfortunately for Beansy, this only makes Richie push harder.
Down, huh? You want me down? You piece of shit!
Richie Aprile's whole thing is that he thinks the world owes him something for going to prison and keeping his mouth shut. Consequently, anybody who isn't a made guy is fair game for robbery and abuse by him once he gets out, at least until he gets his money straight. It's like the great American poet Marshall Mathers once put it, "Right now I feel like I just hit the rock bottom. I got problems. Now everybody on my block's got 'em." Richie would recognize this sentiment even though he'd hate the music behind it. He's old school, as he's fond of telling people. The kind of guy who knows you're not allowed to put a ring around a woman's eye unless you've already put a ring around her finger first. Except he's also a hypocrite who does exactly that. Because once you're a violent sociopath, what's the point in being consistent? But we're not here to talk about Richie Aprile's personal morality or staggering lack thereof. We're here to talk about the guy who stepped up and saved Tony Soprano from getting his shit kicked in by this wild-ass upstart. Before Janice shot Richie dead in the kitchen of her childhood home, before Chris Moltisanti and Furio carted him off to be dismembered and disposed of, there was a human stop sign in Aprile's path that prevented him from sliding on Tony Soprano in the first place. A guy named Albert Alley Boy Barese, cousin to Larry Barese, captain of the Barese crew. Both men worked under Tony as DeMeo family members, but seemed to operate at a remove from the main nexus of bullshitting and politicking that takes place around Satriali's and the Bing and various other associated family hangouts. They pledge fealty to Tony same as anyone else, just not so theatrically. You get the impression that if Larry laughs at one of Tony's jokes, it's because he actually finds them funny, not out of some flunky's insincere sense of patronage. So in a way, it makes perfect sense that Alley Boy is the one to put the kibosh on Richie Aprile's proposed assassination of Big T. He doesn't posture or pose when he does this, doesn't pretend to be more friendly to Tony than he really is. He's not needlessly antagonistic the way Richie can be, but when things don't go his way, he doesn't hide his disappointment either. The impression he gives is one of an affable dunce. Not too bright, not too threatening. But make no mistake about it, this guy is a stone-cold killer when the need arises, as he's only too happy to reveal in the aftermath of Jackie Jr.'s disastrous robbery of Ralph Cifaretto's card game later in the series. The conversation between him and Richie starts off innocently enough, though. Richie joining Alley Boy at Larry's social club while Larry's away, a guest of the government. Alley Boy elbows up to the bar and asks Richie,
"So, you get married? Settling down, huh?"
And Richie acknowledges that he is indeed retiring a single man's jersey, but laments the cost of the wedding. He pivots from that straight to,
"I didn't need that shit that happened the other day."
To which Albert agrees in his standard verbatim fashion.
"You don't need that shit to happen the other day."
And now the dance has begun. A couple of things are happening here that are worth noting. One, Alley Boy's poker face. The fucking thing never changes. He's a mannequin here, a statue. One of those paintings that follows you with its eyes alone. This guy is harder to read than Braille without fingers. No tells to him. Barely a raised brow. Only the most modest turn at the edge of his mouth when he rattles off what passes for a joke. Contrast this with Richie Aprile and those Manson lamps of his, that gleam in his eye telegraphing a wolf-like appetite for everything in sight, even as he's smiling. The man is totally transparent, a ghost stripped of its sheet. And Alley Boy's onto him here, already got his number. He sees the play before the ball is even snapped. Richie tries finding common ground by cracking a joke of his own, having a little fun at Larry's expense about getting a facelift right before going to jail.
Imagine getting a facelift. 1 week later, you're in jail.
How does Alley Boy feel the attempt at camaraderie?
Can you imagine that? You get a facelift, 1 week later you're in jail?
He dryly recites his own words back to him. Doldrums on the high seas. Takes the wind right out of Richie's sails. This is an incredibly effective way to murder any sense of closeness without actually telling someone to go fuck themselves. Ladies, try this the next time some creep won't leave you alone at the Dave & Buster's wraparound. Fellas, notice this when that hottie in the leopard print tube top, who's plainly ignoring her kids, repeats your pickup line right back to you. She doesn't want it. Go play Space Invaders. Even Richie, who could find offense in the most innocuous of statements,
What's mine is not yours to give me.
doesn't quite know what to do with this tactic. He's genuinely befuddled by this shadrul, baffled by his apparent idiocy. Lacking anything better to do, he goes back to his attempt at temptation.
I had the feeling you didn't like what you were hearing.
Only for Alley Boy to counter that Larry expected to get fucked out of the Fairfield Township garbage hauling contract, but isn't too stressed over it on account of his upcoming trial. In no position to go into the unknown, not knowing. This is when Richie makes his move.
How about you, Albert? You weigh in anytime.
What's interesting here is that Richie never explicitly says that he wants to put a bullet straight in Tony's head, yet Alley Boy immediately intuits his meaning. And for Richie, it's all downhill from there. He takes the bad news to Junior Soprano, who's been puppeteering him the whole time, getting him to stick his neck out against Tony, selling coke on the very garbage routes T lets him run. Sidebar on that issue. Selling coke out of garbage trucks has to be the weirdest way to move narcotics. I have zero idea how that was supposed to work. The cocaine goes in the garbage cans after they're dumped? One of the sanitation guys hops out and underhands a brick onto somebody's front porch? This isn't really a viable plan for moving cocaine nearly as much as it sounds like the kind of plan you come up with when you're doing too much cocaine. Then again, the mafia did actually move heroin through pizza parlors, so I guess anything's possible. But that's all a separate issue. Water over the dam. Let's get back to Junior throwing Richie under the bus. Junior laments to Bobby Bacala that his one-time pawn is a fucking loser. He couldn't sell it. He's not respected. So what's a failed revolutionary to do? He takes the news of this aborted revolt straight to the boss. Naturally, Tony suspects Junior's motives here, asking him,
What the fuck is Richie telling you all?
which Junior artfully diverts into an opportunity to portray himself as a savvy yet loyal operator, rather than the snaky fuck he actually is.
You think something with him?
Tony's still not convinced by this, though.
What gave him that idea?
But Junior's cagey as can be, ready with the rejoinder.
It's what I wanted him to
They
believe.
go back and forth over this. Tony trying to trip up his uncle and get him to admit to betraying him, which is never going to happen. Junior's simply too slick for that. He's an old man in a profession where men often die young, doing this type of thing his entire life. Junior's so smooth that by the end of their conversation, he not only has Tony's gratitude, he's managed to earn a few more percentage points on his hauling contract. He even ends up casting aspersions at Janice, further deflecting from his malfeasance by setting his nephew and niece against each other. From there, it's a simple matter of letting nature take its course. Tony can't tolerate dysentery in the ranks any more than Christopher Moltisanti can differentiate between descent and bloody diarrhea. It's a matter of survival here. He brings in Silvio to get his perspective, and Sil tells him he thinks it's time to take out the trash. Tony says, "Get it done." From there, we get a total Black Swan event, a wild card moment nobody saw coming. The trigger man who takes out Richie isn't Silvio or Christopher or Furio or anybody you might expect. It's Janice Soprano pumping multiple shots into Richie's shit-talking frame, laying him out cold right on the linoleum over a petty domestic squabble. Richie cracks her in the face because she articulates what he's long suspected about his ballroom dancing son, that he might be gay. Then she goes on to say how it's no big deal if he is. So of course Richie clocks her on account of being old school. And of course Janice shoots him in the chest on account of being a fucking soprano. It's probably tempting for people to give Janice her flowers here, make her the heroine of this particular episode, but that's the wrong way of looking at this. Janice was backing Richie's attempt to unseat her brother, which effectively means she was encouraging him to go out and kill Tony. She's as cannibalistic as anyone else in that death cult disguised as a family, no different than Junior Olivia. When she shot Richie, she did so in defense of her own honor. And that's laudable in its own right, because the motherfucker had it coming. But the guy who really killed Richie, who made it so he was already a dead man walking, his nuts already snipped, his name already in the hat, that's Alley Boy Barese. He's the one who blew the whistle at that fork in the road Richie tried to run through. He's the guy who refused to buy what Richie was selling, because deep down he's the type of man who has no taste for catastrophe, who sees cataclysmic change for what it is. Not necessary, not welcome, nothing at all like much needed reform. Alley Boy is the type to stand to thwart history, hands out wide, muttering, "I don't think so." Alley Boy is the polar opposite of John Gotti gunning down Castellano, Alan Dulles and John Foster playing circle jerk with Carlos Marcello right before JFK eats the magic bullet. He's the glue that holds things together when people lose their cool, when there's torches and pitchforks in the air. He's the mortar that supports the whole structure and edifice that makes the mafia possible, the principle that prevents unnecessary bloodshed, that prolongs the life of a dynasty. Look at the families and men that last, and you'll see they're the ones who keep out of the papers. The Detroit Combination, Russell Buffalino, the Traficantes down in Tampa. The opposite holds true too. The loudest, most Richie Aprile type operators are the ones who blow everything to pieces. Gotti and Crazy Joe Gallo, Nicky Scarfo and Tony Spilotro, everybody from the Philadelphia mob except for Angelo Bruno. These are the types Alley Boy must have had in mind when he decided to put his foot down and tell Richie where to go. Far from being a parakeet-brained moron, it was Alley Boy who had the intelligence and foresight to look into the future and see what a family led by Richie Aprile would look like. He saw the volatility, the unhinged greed and maniacal bent of Richie's dark desperation, his unyielding need for power and respect. He knew that a guy willing to turn Beansy Gaeta into a shopping cart over crumbs is equally willing to whack underlings refusing to kick up exorbitant tribute. Alley Boy and his cousin Larry are astute judges of the human character, but more than this, they have an instinctual reverence for structure and tradition. The mafia, often depicted as a pyramid in which the money flows up to a single point of coercive power, would actually be better represented by a spider's web, with the spider being the boss himself, the web being the soldiers and capos, underboss, consigliere, and associates. Just because you're on the web doesn't mean you know how the whole thing is put together. Not every bug flexing the silk strands is supposed to be in charge. Alley Boy may not be thrilled with the way Tony runs things, but he understands that sometimes the devil you know is better than the next in line, that there's no profit in rocking the boat in an already stormy sea. He may not have been able to save Tony from his ultimate fate, but he did put some more time on his clock. He may not have been able to keep the Lupertazis from ultimately taking over New Jersey, but my guess is that the DeMeo crime family of which he's a part made out okay in the end. Guys like Alley Boy are a rare breed, discreet, sensible, balanced. They may not get the respect they deserve, but they keep the money coming in. They keep the light on in dark times. The unknown out there in the open, where everyone can see it for what it is.